Moving forward, the next book, all set to launch, is from Rupa Publication, Aparnasen, a Biography. I request Rupa Publication, Manu Chakravarthy and Devapriya Sanyal to unveil the book. Now I hand over the conversation to Devapriya Sanyal.
Good morning, gang. This is a book on one of our distinguished filmmakers, women filmmakers, Aparnasen, published by Rupapublications. It's an exhaustive study covering all the films, and the book is analytical. So I don't know how much can be done in 30 minutes. So what I will do is I will make some preliminary statements because this is supposed to be a conversation, the author in conversation with me. So since the book has just been released, I'll make some statements which Devapriya will respond to and which will also be some kind of an introduction, whatever we can manage. I don't know how much I can cover because I can go on for 2 hours with this book. Anyway, Devapriya, by way of making an introductory statement, your introductory statement to the book, tell us how you went about structuring this book. How did you organize the thematic and aesthetic concerns? And what preoccupations did you have? Because you have a whole tradition of women directors. So talk about your own preoccupation with the book and the film make.
So this was her cinema and Rupapublications cinema was a part of my postdoctoral research in JNU and ICSSR, they granted me the fellowship. So Aparnasen is actually a household name in Bengali, like cinema. So like Ray, we have grown up watching her films also, but since I had to do her, I had to study her academically, it became very different. The way I had to look at her cinema, so it was no longer like innocent viewing. It had to become more active. So I felt that she looks at women in a particular way that Ray doesn't, Bhatak doesn't, Sen doesn't, like Mrinal Sen doesn't. Since I have two Sens here, so it was a little difficult kind of organizing. It was kind of difficult organizing her thematically because she's working on communalism, she's working on the Anglo-Indian, lonely Anglo-Indian woman in her first film, and then she moves on to modifying communalism again. So it was a little difficult, but then I tried to make it with whatever I could, the best I could.
You just referred to how you're trying to contextualize pronouncing with Vivek, Gadak, all that. But you see, there is something in particular I would draw your attention to. You have left out, you mentioned him only by name, Aparnasen.
Yeah.
Now that's very important. Injustice has been done to him. And so we had a major session at the Goa International Film Festival and Sharmila Tagore acknowledged it in our session. Let me see, I'm not going to mention all the films, but certainly focusing on women. Kshudita Pashan, that's Hungry Stones, Kanike and Atiti, Nirjan Saikate, which means deserted sands, and extraordinary films like Jatugraha and Adalat Ok Ektamei and Jatugraha. These are phenomenally excellent films. A very different kind of a preoccupation. So if you look at this cluster and also think of the tradition of Bengali cinema, I'll move into other traditions later on. Now, how do you react to this specific feminist, whatever you call, because she doesn't call herself a feminist. So what was the position you took in relation to her creative position, aesthetic position in relation to her women characters? Talk in some detail about this.
Yeah, so when I actually interviewed her, she said like she refused to be called a feminist filmmaker. But like when I was studying her, I mean, I can't call her anything other than a feminist filmmaker. If I look at a film like Poroma, I mean, the way she's treating the woman character, she's treating the male character, especially the husband. I don't think I can call her anything other than a feminist filmmaker. But what I also noticed is she has a very she has a male gaze, and that comes out in Poroma, and I think it comes out in Mr. Poroma. So I found that a little problematic. She's a feminist filmmaker.
But we will not get into those distinctions now. But you see, moving a little out of Bengali tradition, one of the most radical films on women, 1937, Shantaram, Duniya Nama. So you have a whole line of filmmakers who have made films. So moving out of this Bengali region, because you see, you belong to a specific area, write in a specific language, make films in a specific language, but you will also go beyond that. So if I should ask you, I can name several other films, but I will just name one of the first films on women, Shantaram, 1937, Duniya Nama. How would you take Aparnasen out of the Bengali context? Talk of how it can also be beyond Bengal to talk of the Indian woman, the Indian women. That's why I mentioned just Duniya Nama. So contextualizing her within the Bengali tradition is one, but how does she do her peregrination outside Bengal? So when you think of the whole list of films made in Kannada, made in Hindi, made in Tamil, Malayalam, so what parallel, I'm not asking you to do any comparison, but what parallels would you draw with other films from other trajectories, because you are also a student of cinema, a scholar in cinema, where would you place her in the Indian context? Because I would like you to place her not just as a Bengali filmmaker, but as an Indian filmmaker dealing with women.
I think I would.
And I'm not mentioning Meera Nair and all others, but some remarks on how would you would trace them beyond this regional confine.
I don't know, I think the closest I can find a parallel to her kind of filmmaking is Saika. Because given her gender, I mean, it will be unfair for me to compare her to the male directors because they will have their own gaze.
No, forget the male or female. Talk of the cinematic texts.
She's one of the first filmmakers, women filmmakers in India. So that way, I think she occupies quite an important position. Language and all, if you do not want to comment on.
Now, let me extend this. Why I ask this question is, it leads me to the next statement. You see, you make a very important distinction. And the important distinction is even when you turn to those who have made what we call parallel cinema, bridge cinema, though of course in one of my interviews with Shyam Benegal, he says it's bridge and all is not. He prefers to call it middle cinema. But the important distinction you make, which comes through so evidently in this book, is that she is more radical than even Shyam Benegal. And you also mentioned Jabbar Patel's Umberta. The point is, you say this is your line from the book. We are not privy to several radical positions of women. So they shut us out, they stop, especially Shyam Benegal, if you think of Bhumika and other films. Whereas this is what I would like you to deal in some detail, that she is very radical. She takes us to the inner worlds, she meaning Aparnasen. And this is where she goes much beyond the frontiers of cinema on women by male film directors. So deal with this, because this is also your introduction of the book and your personal take on Aparnasen.
This is a very difficult question, but I'll try to answer it.
The difficult question comes out of your text.
Okay.
And it's very important. So I would like you to talk as much as you can. much against your will, because this is crucial and this is central to your book. You mention Bhumika, you mention others and say, we are not primary. They take safe positions. That's your point. And so how does she take us beyond these safe positions? It's a difficult question, but it comes out of the book. So you must deal with this.
Okay, so I'll take the example of Boroma and then maybe Mr. and Mrs. Iyer, because that's a film that most people would have watched. The idea of sexuality, I think, that she explores. It's there in Bhumika, it's there in Unveiled also, but the fact that she allows the woman like more space, and there are dialogues. She does it through dialogues, and I think she does it through camera movements, also certain things. I think the agency that she gives the woman as a woman filmmaker, I think that makes her kind of radical. That maybe Shanghai didn't allow.
They are not.
Yeah,
They
do
do
not,
that. Whereas she has a kind of daring, which they men directors do not.
Even in Boroma, she actually has shots of the man and woman, like in very intimate scenes. And eventually, I think her husband was there actually. It was the husband who was the lover. So I think it was quite radical in that way, and also like making a middle class Bengali woman actually get into a relationship, and the whole family comes to know, and then the stance she takes at the end, where she actually decides to take up a job and not continue to be the housewife. That way, I found it quite radical.
Why this is important is because you make two very important distinctions. You say the prescriptive roles for women, I'm quoting, for women in Hindi cinema, they are replaced by the individual-centric representations of women in Bengali art cinema. So, you quite often turn to Punisha April with a Aparna. So now, keeping this sentence in mind, you just develop this thesis a little further, because this is central to your book. So I insist on having your response here. I will quote it for you. Your own lines, prescriptive roles for women in Hindi cinema, now replaced by individual-centric representations of women in Bengali art cinema. And that's why you also make this statement. These are all quotes from your book. Women characters who exercise their agency within a patriarchal Bengali society. So talk a bit about the patriarchal Bengali society, about people like Aparnasen, who give women, you use the word agency, within the patriarchal context.
Now, if I have to talk about Hindi cinema first, well, we all know that women are just like, I don't know, the heroines are like collateral damage to the hero. It's always like male-centric narrative in Hindi cinema. And in Bengali art cinema, I felt that they try to give women some space, some kind of like
within the patriarchal Bengali
society. Rupa does it quite a lot actually. In fact, I find him like a little more like, let's say, feminist filmmaker than even Aparnasen to some extent. Possibly, given his like I felt he understood women better also. Like sometimes it's not necessary that as a woman I understand my sex better, or you as a man understand your sex better. So probably takes a third person to understand.
Since you mentioned Rupapublications, I would like you to comment on this. Now when you turn to this Chitrangana, so there's this crisscross, which is also fascinating in Rupapublications, between the male, female, women, this crisscross. So there are those places where what is male, what is female. And Chitrangana comes from Tagore, the Manipuri, and Arjuna visiting. So talk of Aparnasen, because you also seem to be quite fond of Rupapublications, and rightly so. But I would like you to respond to Aparnasen through a film like Chitrangana, Rupapublications. Because it's not exclusive male, female, because there's also this transgender going beyond one's gender.
I think when Aparna is dealing with male characters and female characters, and doesn't have that, like, I don't know, the advantage of fluidity of gender. I think she tries to compartmentalize like the genders the way Rupa won't, because it's like he tries to explore. I think it's more exploratory than she is. I felt that, like,
So she stops somewhere.
yeah, she stops somewhere, and I always feel that she has that activist, like she's doing some kind of activism for women. Though I mean, she probably wouldn't agree, but there's a bit of an activist because she's been an editor for Shananda, and it's an excellent magazine that we had for women.
So in that sense, there is an ideological limitation.
Yes, I think she has that.
Whereas Rupa as a very creative person, just demolishes all ideological constructs.
I think he was more concerned with his person, or what he wanted to, like, be seen as, or what he wanted I don't know, his cinema to be looked at in a particular way. I felt that with his cinema, which I don't feel with his cinema. There are limitations.
There's also something, anything more to say?
Those?
There's something very interesting that you observe, which is beyond patriarchy, gender abuse, male abuse, and all that. And that's a very sensitive observation. What I refer to is the troubled women with physical disability, women with, shall we say, mental problems. I don't want to use words that these idiotic psychiatrists, those shrinks would use, but people who are not normal, whatever that the distinction is between this is normal, this is abnormal. Meeti in 15 Park Avenue, schizophrenia, Uma, and certainly Cuckoo. But you see, these are not normal, going by open with societal classifications, idiotic, because they are only interested in giving labels. But the point is, these women also have enormous creative potential, and they have their own sense of reality, what is unreal. So you also bring in Shankaracharya talking of illusion, but Maya. But Maya is not that something does not exist, but it is ephemeral, it's transitory, and this is why the Buddha, more than Shankaracharya, said everything is transitory and everything is for the moment, which is why at times some dogmatic Advaitins themselves called Shankara Prachanna Bauddha, which means Shankaracharya is a Buddhist in disguise. So how do you look at these women? And remember, Cuckoo, outstanding when it comes to singing Ravindra Sangeet. So, on one hand, you have society, patriarchal exploitation, gender exploitation, use all those words. But there's also a sense of freedom that these women create through their creative, imaginative, perhaps even fantasies. Doesn't this take Aparnasen, because you spend quite a lot of time on this beyond her own ideological constructs, which also means that a creative work, in spite of the consciously held ideology of the person, writer or poet or novelist or filmmaker, the creative work helps us. This is what we must see. Takes the creative person, man or woman, beyond ideological constructs. So please make a statement on this.
Yes,
I
maybe
don't want you to just say yes.
No, actually, I was maybe doing injustice to her.
This is very important, and so this is time you also give justice to her. But the point is you recognize it, so you have done justice. But for our audience, could you just elaborate a bit on this? Because these are also very important alternatives. These women.
Yeah.
Coco, Uma, Meeti.
Yeah. The reason why I'm like a little.
There could have been an entire chapter on this, crossing ideologies.
Yeah, that could have been.
So please respond to this. Over 5 minutes.
Yes, so to do her justice, I think, yes, she's probably the only film director. I mean, until like other people have stepped in, like with Margaret was strong. These have come much later. I mean, like 2021. So I think she was one of the first women filmmakers to actually address this people with different abilities, especially women characters, and try to draw their world for the audience. Yes, so That's very important.
But this is something I really want you to respond to because you don't take it seriously, Sonata. But you know, I stuck with look at the characters all in a drawing room. Dolan Sen and Subhadra Parik and Meera Samira, question of transgender, Aruna Chaturvedi, all of them looking back, caught with their regrets, with their disappointments, and at one stage, Subhadra Parik says, in spite of being brutalized by Sangram, she says, you don't understand any of this. Why, in spite of being beaten up, bashed up, I go on. So there are different women with their regrets and the whole film Sonata, which you don't take seriously, but I would like you to reconsider, is all about women, their multiple worlds, inner worlds, and so we need to enter those inner spaces. And you know, Aruna Chaturvedi has regrets about Avinash, and Dolan Sen has an affair. So there are very, very complex, it's a very complex tapestry. So can you now talk of Sonata and do some more justice to Aparna? Not that you have to agree with me, but I'm drawing attention to many things from the book, out of the book.
Actually, yes, I could consider Sonata a time constraint. So I was actually working on my next book, so academic book.
But now, that's why I opened it up.
I found it very verbose and like where issues were like, you know, kind of getting muddled up, I felt. It's one of the reasons why I didn't consider the film at all. Also, Japanese wife.
Japanese wife, I haven't taken it serious because it's too unreal.
Maybe for the next edition.
This Sonata, I think you must look at the multiple spaces and you think it's verbose. I see it as an externalization of inner drama. Now I'm just asking you to reconsider, not just going by what you have said. There's also an opportunity to reconsider, re-examine, and that's what as a serious scholar you would also like to do.
I'll do it for the next edition.
Thank you, Devapriya.
Thank you, ma'am, for this insightful conversation.